This is a story called Sarasponda by a dear friend of mine, Debbie Friedlander. Once upon a time, not so long ago, there was a princess whose name was Sarasponda. Now you may think princes are perfect, but most are not. Most are just like you and me. She loved to play outside, and lately she'd been spending a lot more time inside. But when she went outside, she played on her skateboard and she collected bugs and did all sorts of things. But there was something very different about her. It was her parents. Her parents were the king and the queen. And it was not an easy relationship because she wanted to go through the garden gate, over the castle wall, to the distant mountains beyond, but her parents, the king and the queen, strictly forbid it, and they would say, "No, no, no, Sarasponda, there are dogs that could bite you. There are cats that would scratch at you. The world is much too dangerous a place these days." So she would spend more time in her room, and she would look out at the distant mountains beyond, and during the day she would go out and play in the yard sometimes, and then there would be dinner time, and the queen would call her, "It's dinner time, Sarasponda." Then she would come in for dinner, and she would sit at the table with the king and the queen, and the queen would always ask her, "How was your day, child?" And she would say, "Okay," but what she really meant was boring. And then she'd ask the question that she always asked, "Can I go through the garden gate, over the castle wall, to the distant mountains beyond?" Well, that night they were having chicken, and the queen was still chewing on a succulent piece of chicken, and the king was slurping down some mashed potatoes, and the gravy was dripping down his chin. And he said, "No, no, no, the world is much too dangerous a place these days, Sarasponda. No, 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 there are cats that might scratch you, dogs that might bite you. No, no, no." She went up to her room that night, and she looked out, and it was just beautiful looking at the mountains, and all of a sudden a bird flew onto her windowsill. They usually flew onto trees, but it landed on her windowsill, and Sarasponda went up to it, and the bird began speaking to her and said, "Sarasponda, you have lost the song in your heart. The song I sing is your song." And it went like this. Sarasponda, 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 ret-set-set. Sarasponda, 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 ret-set-set. Oh, Sarasponda was so released to have a wonderful song to sing. Yes, she practiced it herself. Sarasponda, 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 ret-set-set. Sarasponda, 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 ret-set-set. That night she dreamt about the distant mountains. Oh, it was so wonderful. And when she went out the next day, there were beautiful clouds, and she could see a bear in one cloud, and a horse in another cloud, and a caterpillar in a cloud. And she was actually a little late for dinner, and so when she got to the table, her mother said, "You mustn't be late for dinner, child." And then she asked, as she always did, "How was your day, child?" And Sarasponda said, "Okay," but what she really meant was boring. And then she asked the question that she always asked, "Can I go through the garden gate, over the castle wall, to the distant mountains beyond?" The queen said, "No, no, no, Sarasponda, the world is much too dangerous a place these days." And the king said, "There are dogs that would bite you, and cats that would scratch at you. No, no, no." Well, she went up to her room that night, and there was a beautiful sunset, and she enjoyed looking out. And then she remembered that song, and she sang it again. Sarasponda, 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 ret-set-set. Sarasponda, 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 ret-set-set. And the next day, she felt so good. She'd had some wonderful dreams in the night, and she went and she dumped out all of her bugs. She took her skateboard and put them down in the basement, and when she came up for dinner that night, they were having roast quail, the king's favorite. And Sarasponda would rather eat her peas than quail any day, and her mother asked her, as she always did, "How was your day, child?" Sarasponda said, "Okay," but what she really meant was boring. And then she asked the question that she always asked, "Can I go through the garden gate, over the castle wall, to the distant mountains beyond?" And the queen said, "Sarasponda, Sarasponda," that said, "No, no, no." And the king said, "There are dogs that might bite you, cats that would scratch at you. The world is much too dangerous a place these days." But Sarasponda was not daunted. She went up, and there was still some beautiful twilight and colors. Oh, fuchsia and blue, and it was such a wonderful sky. And she sang with all of her heart that night. Sarasponda, 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 et. Sarasponda, 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 et. Adore-o, adore boom de-o, adore boom de ret set, atse patse o. And that bird came in through her window, followed by 1,000 birds, each carrying a feather in its beak. And she spoke to Sarasponda. She said, "Sarasponda, I hear the song in your heart. These are your wings." And Sarasponda let them become a cape around her body. And the bird said, "Fly with me." And Sarasponda flew with her out the window, over the garden gate, over the castle wall to the distant mountains beyond. And you know what? There were no dogs to bite her. There weren't any cats to scratch at her. She was perfectly happy and safe out there. Well, you're probably wondering what happened to her parents, the king and the queen. Well, they worried for some time. They sent out the royal guard, but they could not find her anywhere. And when they would go out to the courtyard in the morning, there was a little bird that would sit in a tree and sing the most delightful song. And the king remarked one morning to the queen, "That little bird has the sweetest song. It reminds me of our daughter, Sarasponda." And the queen said, "Sarasponda? No! How could a bird remind you of our daughter?" But the king knew deep in his heart that Sarasponda came to visit them to sing her beautiful song.